The diner door exploded inward at 3:22 in the morning. Not gently. Not like someone seeking shelter from the summer storm that was tearing through Las Vegas like a blade wrapped in ice. The door slammed against the wall hard enough to rattle the vintage Coca-Cola sign, and Sofia Hartley stumbled through the opening, drenched and bleeding, her left eye swelling purple as a plum, her grey hoodie torn open to reveal a gash on her shoulder that wept blood down her ribs in steady drips. She was 29 years old but looked 40. Her dark hair plastered wet against a face pale as chalk. Her breathing came in gasps like she had been running for miles. Behind her, trembling in a soaked yellow dress, was a child. Emma. 8 years old. Her thin arms locked around Sofia's neck with the grip of someone who believed that letting go meant disappearing forever. The black and white checkered floor of Frank's 24-hour diner reflected the neon pink and blue glow from the jukebox in the corner. The smell hung thick and heavy, stale coffee, bacon grease, the ghost of 1,000 late-night meals consumed by people with nowhere else to be. At a corner booth, 3 men froze. The man in the center was Aleandro Caruso. 38 years old, with dark eyes like flint and the kind of stillness that comes from knowing exactly how dangerous you are. His tailored black suit cost more than Sofia's entire life compressed into dollar bills. A silver scar ran from his left eye down to his cheekbone, a permanent reminder of a wound he refused to let people forget. His coffee cup hung suspended between the table and his mouth, steam rising in delicate spirals. Beside him sat Rocco and Franco, his lieutenants. Both men wore identical expressions of stone. The diner went silent except for the thunder that cracked the sky outside and the sound of Sofia's ragged breathing. The waitress behind the counter, a woman named Dolores who had worked the night shift for 17 years, dropped a plate. It shattered against the tile floor. Sofia's eyes met Aleandro's across the expanse of red vinyl booths and the terrible, absolute silence. She looked up at him, blood dripping from her split lip, and whispered words that would unravel everything. "Please," she said. "He's coming." Emma buried her face in Sofia's chest, her small body shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. That was when Sofia saw his face. Not his danger. Not the power that radiated from him like heat from a furnace. She saw the resemblance. The shape of Emma's eyes. The curve of her small chin. The exact line of her mouth. Recognition moved across Sofia's face like lightning across a dark sky, and she understood in that single moment that the girl she had been hiding at St. Catherine's women's shelter for 6 months, the girl she read bedtime stories to, the girl whose nightmares she soothed in the darkness, was connected to this man in a way that made her blood turn to ice water. The door to the kitchen swung open. Dolores had pressed the panic button. She always pressed it. But what Sofia did not know was that the child trembling against her chest was the daughter Aleandro Caruso had been searching for through every channel of his criminal empire for 193 days. That Emma's photograph was pinned above his desk, her small face memorized by 52 men who would have torn the city apart to find her. Before we continue, drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming tomorrow. Every like, every comment, every share is a reminder that these stories matter. Now let us go back to the beginning. Let us return to 3 hours earlier, when Sofia Hartley was sleeping in her 2004 Honda Civic behind the shuttered Sinclair gas station on East Fremont Street. The car smelled like old upholstery and desperation. She had parked it there because the lot was empty after midnight, because the broken security light meant no one would see her, because she had learned through 8 years of running that invisibility was survival. The back seat was her home. A blue vinyl suitcase contained everything she owned that mattered: 7 changes of clothing, a pair of worn shoes with holes in the soles, and a small leather-bound book with yellowed pages that her grandmother had filled with recipes and notes written in the margins in fading blue ink. Sofia slept on the vinyl with her hand tucked under her cheek, her breathing shallow and careful. Even in sleep, she did not relax. Her body remained coiled like a spring, ready to flee at the first sound of danger. She had learned to sleep like that too. The digital clock on the Honda's dashboard read 12:24 a.m. when the sound came. It was not a loud sound. It was worse than loud. It was the sound of her own name spoken in a voice that had defined 8 years of her life as a descent into hell. A voice that had whispered cruelty in the darkness. A voice that had made her believe, for long stretches of time when she was trapped, that she deserved the bruises, the broken ribs, the cigarette burns, the fear that lived in her chest like a second heart. Sofia. She woke gasping, her hand reaching for the door latch, her entire body flooded with adrenaline so pure it tasted like metal. Outside the car window, Douglas Hale stood illuminated by the weak glow of his phone's flashlight. 35 years old, with the kind of handsome face that hid the rot underneath. His expensive cologne mixed with the smell of whiskey. He wore the confidence of a man who had learned that he could do terrible things and walk away unpunished. He had learned that because it was true. The police had turned their backs on Sofia 6 times. The detective assigned to her case had told her, word for word, "You called us on him 4 times. 4 times we came, and 4 times you dropped the charges. The system doesn't protect women who won't protect themselves." The message was clear. Douglas Hale belonged to this city in a way that Sofia, with her bruises and her fear and her stories that changed with each retelling, did not. "I know you're in there," Douglas said, his voice muffled through the glass. "I can see you breathing. The car fogs up when you're scared. It always does." Sofia's hand found the door lock. It was already locked. She had started locking it the moment she closed her eyes. Douglas pressed his face against the window. His breath fogged the glass. He smiled at her through the moisture, and that smile was the most terrifying thing she had ever seen because it told her that he was not angry. Anger she could understand. Anger had limits. He was enjoying this. "I missed you," he said. "Come on, baby. Don't you miss me? Don't you want to come home?" Sofia fumbled for her keys with shaking fingers. The engine turned over on the second try, guttural and reluctant, like the car itself was afraid. She threw it into reverse and backed out of the parking space so fast that Douglas had to jump aside or be hit. She did not want to hit him. She wanted to kill him. Those are different things. The Honda fishtailed onto East Fremont Street and Douglas's laughter chased her down the empty road like something alive, like something that would never let her go. She checked her rearview mirror 3 times, then 4 times, then she lost count. No headlights followed her. That was somehow worse than if they had. Because it meant he was not afraid of losing her. It meant he knew where she would go. It meant he had always known. Sofia drove through the winding streets of Las Vegas at 1 in the morning with her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip the wheel. She drove past casinos with their lights still burning, past closed storefronts with gates pulled down like the city was shuttering itself against the night. She drove to St. Catherine's Women's Shelter. She had been volunteering there for 8 months, helping with breakfast, reading to the children in the residential wing, doing laundry and small repairs in exchange for permission to sometimes sleep in the administrative office when it was cold. The shelter director, Sister Margaret, had stopped asking questions about why Sofia looked the way she did. Asking questions was a kindness that Sofia could not afford. But Emma was why Sofia kept coming back. Emma, who had arrived at the shelter with no records and no family and a silence so complete that the counselors had wondered if she could speak at all. Emma, who had watched Sofia across the dining room on that first morning and then, slowly, over the course of weeks, had begun to whisper. "What's your name?" Sofia had asked. Emma, the girl, had whispered, like the name itself might break. "That's a beautiful name. Do you like stories?" Emma had nodded, and Sofia had sat beside her on the worn carpet in the residential room and opened her grandmother's recipe book, which was not a recipe book at all but a collection of handwritten stories in the margins, tales of a woman who had loved deeply and survived loss. Emma had fallen asleep with her head on Sofia's shoulder. That was 6 months ago. Now, at 1 in the morning, Sofia found Emma in the children's dormitory, asleep under a thin blanket on a cot that had held 30 girls before her. Sofia woke her gently. "We're going," Sofia whispered. Emma did not ask where. The child had learned long ago that questions were dangerous. She put her hand in Sofia's, her small fingers cold and trusting, and together they walked into the night. The storm came within the hour. Lightning split the sky like a whip made of light. Rain poured down in sheets thick enough to blur the world into watercolor smears of neon and darkness. Sofia drove the Honda without a destination. She just drove, with Emma asleep against the window, her small face peaceful in the strobing light of the lightning. Sofia's shoulders ached. Her left eye throbbed where Douglas had hit her before she had managed to run, and there was a gash on her shoulder from something. She had stopped trying to remember the details of how things happened to her. The details did not matter. Only the running mattered. By 3 in the morning, she was desperate. Desperate in a way that made her do things she would not have done in daylight. She drove toward the only place that was open at that hour, the only place where she might sit down and breathe for a few minutes while Emma slept. Frank's 24-hour diner sat on a corner like a beacon, its neon sign glowing pink and blue against the rain. Sofia pulled into the parking lot and parked the Honda in a space at the far edge, where it would not be visible from the street. She looked at Emma, still sleeping, and made a decision that would unravel everything. She carried the girl inside. The diner was almost empty. A couple sat in a booth, barely speaking to each other. An old man nursed coffee at the counter. Dolores, the waitress, looked up from refilling salt shakers. Sofia chose a booth in the back, away from the windows. She settled Emma against the red vinyl seat and ordered water and toast that she could not afford. The toast came. Sofia broke it into small pieces and set it in front of Emma in case the girl woke up hungry. That was when the 3 men came in. They wore expensive black suits that cost more than Sofia had spent on her entire life. They moved with the coordinated grace of people who had trained together, who understood each other's silences. They sat in a corner booth without waiting to be seated, and Dolores brought them coffee before they asked. Sofia tried not to look at them. She had learned that looking at dangerous men was sometimes enough to make them notice you. She kept her eyes on the water in front of her, on the toast she had no appetite for, on the small sleeping face of Emma, who looked peaceful in a way that Sofia had forgotten was possible. But then Emma shifted in her sleep, and the neon light caught her face at a different angle. Sofia saw the moment the man in the center, the one with the scar, stopped moving. She did not see him stand. He was simply standing, his body moving with the precision of someone who had made every action a decision. His dark eyes found Emma's sleeping face across the distance of the diner. And in that moment, Sofia understood that she had made a terrible mistake. That is when the diner door exploded inward, and Douglas Hale stood backlit by lightning, soaking wet, his face twisted with rage. "Sofia," he roared. "You're not taking that kid. She's not yours. You don't get to keep her." The man with the scar rose to his full height. Rocco and Franco rose with him, their movement synchronized and terrifying. Sofia stood. She pulled Emma close. The girl woke with a gasp, disoriented and afraid. "Don't," Sofia said to Douglas, her voice steady in a way that surprised her. "Don't come near her." Douglas laughed. He took a step forward. Sofia did something she had never done before. She hit him. She did not think about it. There was no calculation, no hesitation. Her fist connected with his jaw with all the force of 8 years of fear transformed into velocity, and Douglas Hale went backward with surprise and pain blooming across his face. He hit the counter. The old man at the counter jumped up and ran for the back. Dolores screamed, a short, sharp sound. But Sofia had already wrapped her arms around Emma and was running toward the kitchen, toward the back exit, toward anything that was not Douglas Hale. That was when the man with the scar moved. The man with the scar did not run. He moved like a knife cutting through air, his body already in motion before Douglas Hale's eyes registered movement. Sofia did not see what happened next. She was already through the kitchen door, Emma pressed against her chest, the girl's small arms wrapped around her neck so tight she could barely breathe. Behind them, the sound of impact. A body hitting something solid. A grunt of pain that was not Sofia's. She pushed through the back exit into the Las Vegas night. Rain fell in sheets, warm and violent, turning the alley behind the diner into a river of black asphalt and broken glass. Her shoes splashed through puddles. Emma whimpered against her shoulder. Sofia ran without thinking, without direction, only knowing that she had to move, had to get away, had to keep this child safe from the man who had spent 8 years teaching her that nowhere was far enough. But what she did not know in that moment was that everything had already changed. 23 hours earlier, Sofia Hartley sat in the backseat of a 2003 Honda Civic with 187,000 miles on the odometer, parked behind an abandoned gas station on the corner of East Fremont and 15th Street. The neon sign above the station flickered in a sickly pattern, on for 3 seconds, off for 2, casting the whole world in alternating shades of pink and absolute darkness. It was 11:41 p.m. on a Thursday night in August, and the heat that had scorched the pavement all day was finally releasing its grip. The temperature had dropped to 91 degrees. In the back seat, that felt like a mercy. Sofia lay curled on top of a folded blanket, wearing shorts and a tank top stained with grease from her shift at Rose's Diner. Her wallet sat on the passenger seat, open, displaying every piece of her financial life. $34 in crumpled bills. A debit card with a zero balance. A driver's license that still showed her maiden name, Hartley, though she had changed back from Hale 3 years ago, one of the only victories she had managed to claim from those 8 years of burning. That license had cost her $75 at the DMV, money she had scraped together by skipping meals for 2 weeks. The photograph showed a woman with dark eyes and black hair, 31 years old but looking a decade older, her expression carefully blank in the way of people who had learned that showing feeling was dangerous. On the seat beside the wallet sat her grandmother's recipe book. Leather binding, soft as skin from 100 years of handling. The pages inside were filled with handwritten recipes in Italian and English, each one annotated in the margins with personal notes. Make this when Tommaso comes home from the war. The children love the lemon zest. Do not be shy with the sugar. For the baby's christening, add honey to the dough. Sofia had carried this book through 8 years with Douglas Hale. It was the only thing he had not destroyed. The only thing she had not allowed him to touch. She opened the book now, letting the leather binding fall open to a page marked with a faded ribbon. Tiramisu. Her grandmother's recipe, written in careful cursive, the letters slanting slightly to the right. Sofia read the ingredients list like other people read prayers. Mascarpone. Cocoa powder. Espresso. Ladyfinger biscuit soaked in coffee and brandy. Simple things. Ingredients that cost money she did not have. But reading the words made her remember a kitchen in a house that belonged to someone else, where her grandmother stood at the counter in a blue apron, her hands moving with the certainty of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. She closed the book at 12:03 a.m. and set it carefully back on the seat. Then she sat up and climbed out of the car, her bones cracking with small protests. 8 years of Douglas Hale had taught her how to move quietly, how to make no sudden sounds, how to keep her body small and careful in the spaces she occupied. She grabbed a plastic bottle of water from the floor of the car, a bar of cheap hand soap from under the seat, and a clean shirt folded in a garbage bag. The night was still warm. Sweat clung to her skin, a film of grease from the kitchen, the smell of coffee and fryer oil baked into every thread of fabric she owned. The abandoned gas station had 2 bathroom stalls on the side, the doors hanging open, the locks broken years ago. Sofia locked herself in the cleanest one and ran the water, cold and rusty at first, then clear. She washed her face and her arms, letting the water drip down to her elbows. She scrubbed her wrists and the inside of her forearms with the soap, methodical and thorough, as if she could wash away the feeling of Douglas's hands, the memory of his voice, the weight of his attention. When she finished, she peeled off her stained shirt and stood bare from the waist up in the darkness. Even in the dim light filtering through the cracked window, she could see the map of scars on her ribs. For new ones, still dark red and tender, from 4 days ago when Douglas had found her walking to work and pushed her into an alley. The police report she filed that morning said she had fallen. That was what she had told the officer, knowing that telling the truth meant nothing. Lieutenant Rocco had taken her statement and then, 12 hours later, she had seen him having dinner with Douglas at a restaurant on the Strip. Through the window, she had watched them laugh together. She put on the clean shirt and walked back to her car. The drive to St. Catherine's Women's Shelter took 18 minutes through empty streets. Las Vegas at 1 a.m. was a city pretending to sleep, the casinos still blazing with light, the side streets empty and dark. The shelter occupied a converted house on Charleston Boulevard, painted a pale yellow that had faded to the color of old milk. There was a fence around the property, chain link, topped with barbed wire that was meant to look protective but felt like something else entirely. Sofia pulled into the parking lot at 1:34 a.m. and cut the engine. She volunteered 3 nights a week at St. Catherine's, working in exchange for shower access and, on the nights when Diane the night manager was feeling generous, a cup of instant oatmeal in the morning. The arrangement was unofficial and precarious. The shelter's director did not know about it. Diane did not ask questions, and Sofia did not offer explanations. They operated in the space between the rules, where desperate people meet other desperate people and small kindnesses become the only currency that matters. The shelter was quiet when Sofia let herself in through the side door, the one Diane always left unlocked. The main room, where the women slept on cots arranged in 2 neat rows, was dark except for the light from the hallway. Sofia could hear breathing, the sound of someone crying quietly into a pillow, the shuffle of movement from the bathroom. She moved past all of it without looking, heading toward the small room where the children slept. There were 3 cots in the children's room tonight. 2 of them were empty. On the third, curled in a tight ball under a thin blanket, was Emma. She was 8 years old, or so she had told Sofia. Small for her age, with dark curly hair that fell to her shoulders and skin the color of honey. She had been at St. Catherine's for 6 months, and in those 6 months, she had spoken to no one except Sofia. The night manager had initially thought she could not speak at all. Then Sofia had sat beside her one night at 2 a.m. and asked, "Can't sleep again, pick cola," and Emma had answered, her voice barely a whisper, "I miss my papa." That was the night everything began to change. Sofia sat down on the edge of Emma's cot now, carefully, so as not to wake her. But the girl's eyes opened immediately, as if she had been waiting in the darkness, alert to any movement nearby. "It's okay," Sofia whispered. "It's just me." Emma sat up, pushing her blanket aside. She was wearing a pink nightgown that belonged to the shelter, too big for her, the neckline hanging loose on her small shoulders. In her lap was a drawing, half-finished, done on the back of a discarded flyer. A man's face, sketched in pencil, with kind eyes and a gentle expression. Sofia had seen this drawing before. Emma drew it almost every night. "Can't sleep?" Sofia asked. Emma shook her head. She handed the drawing to Sofia without a word. "This is your papa?" Sofia asked. "Yes." Emma's voice was small, fractured like old glass. "The police lady said I can't remember him. She said my brain made him up because I wanted him to be good. But I remember. I remember everything." Sofia looked at the drawing. The proportions were childlike, but the expression was so precise, so filled with longing, that it broke something inside her chest. She had spent 8 years learning how to keep her feelings locked away, how to nod and smile and say nothing. But sitting in the darkness of St. Catherine's shelter, looking at the face of a child who had lost everything, something old began to crack. "Tell me about him," Sofia said. Emma took a breath. Her fingers twisted together in her lap. "He read me stories before bed. He never yelled. When I was scared of the dark, he would leave the hall light on so I could see the doorway. He told me he loved me every single day. And then one night, he didn't come home. The police said he did something bad. The police said he was a bad man. But that is not true. That is not the papa I remember." Sofia listened. She did not speak. After a while, Emma lay back down, and Sofia sat beside her until her breathing deepened and her eyes closed. Then Sofia went to the shower room and washed away another layer of the day. It was 3:17 a.m. when Sofia's phone buzzed in her pocket. She was in the hallway, walking toward Diane's office, when the buzz came. One text message from a number that was not saved in her phone. She opened it anyway, knowing already who it was. The knowing had become a kind of sixth sense, a frequency that rang through her body whenever Douglas was near, even if he was miles away. "I saw you on Fremont Street. New car." Her hands began to shake. 2 more messages came in rapid succession. "You can't hide forever, Sofia. I'm getting better at finding you." She turned the phone off. Not just a silent off. She would turn it back on in the morning to check for messages from the shelter or the diner, and then she would turn it off again. This had become her routine, a small ritual of control in a life where control was an illusion. At 4:41 a.m., Diane found her sitting in the children's room again, watching Emma sleep. "You okay?" Diane asked. She was a large woman in her 50s, with grey streaking through her brown hair and a face that had learned how to hold sadness without flinching. She had been working at shelters for 23 years. She recognized the look in Sofia's eyes because she had seen it in 1,000 other eyes before. Sofia nodded. She did not trust her voice. "He's looking for you again," Diane said. It was not a question. "Yes. You need to file another report." "It won't matter." Diane sighed. She sat down on one of the empty cots, the metal frame creaking under her weight. "Sofia, I can let Emma stay here as long as the system allows. But eventually, someone is going to notice. Eventually, someone is going to ask questions. And when that happens, if she is not officially in the system, they are going to take her away. They will put her in a foster home, and you will lose her." Sofia looked at the small girl sleeping on the cot, her dark hair spread across the pillow like a question. Emma had come to the shelter 6 months ago, terrified, refusing to speak. The intake officer that night had been new and overworked and distracted. Emma had hidden in the storage closet while Sofia distracted everyone else. By the time anyone found her, Sofia had already claimed her as a relative. By the time questions started being asked, Sofia had created a whole fictional identity for her. A distant cousin. A temporary arrangement until family could be located. The lies had held so far. But Diane was right. Time was running out. "I need 3 more months," Sofia said. "Just 3 months. By then I will have saved enough money to hire a lawyer. By then, maybe I can figure out how to." "To what? Run?" Sofia did not answer. Diane stood up. "There are other ways, Sofia. There are people who can help. Organizations. Legal aid. There are options besides disappearing." But Sofia had already tried those options. She had been to 3 different legal aid offices. She had filed reports with the police 9 times. She had a restraining order that meant nothing because the police did not enforce it. She had learned the hard way that the system was not designed to protect women like her. The system was designed to manage them, to count them, to file them away in databases and pretend that the filing was itself a kind of justice. The sun rose at 6:43 a.m. over Las Vegas, turning the sky the color of blood orange. Sofia walked Emma to the bus stop and watched her get on the yellow school bus with 7 other children. Emma turned to look back at her from the window, her small face pressed against the glass, her dark eyes following Sofia until the bus turned a corner and disappeared. Then Sofia walked to Rose's diner, where she would work from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., and where she would earn $62 in wages and perhaps another $15 in tips if she was lucky and smiled at the right people. $34 remained in her wallet. After today's shift, she would have approximately $111. Cordelia Blackwood was demanding $22,000 in 3 days or Emma would disappear into the foster care system forever. The mathematics of that equation made no sense. The gap between what she had and what she owed was so vast that it seemed like the universe was laughing at her. But Sofia had learned not to think about mathematics. She had learned to think only about the next shift, the next meal, the next moment when she could see Emma's face and know that the girl was still safe. What she did not know, as she tied her apron strings and poured her first cup of coffee for a customer who would not leave a tip, was that in 6 hours, everything would change. The man with the scar would walk into Rose's diner. Lightning would split the sky. And the invisible woman whom no one had noticed would finally become visible to someone with the power to remake her entire world. The purple-white lightning split the sky at 2:40 in the morning, and Sofia Hartley was walking Emma home from the shelter when she heard the footsteps behind the dumpster on the corner of Charleston and 15th Street. The night was warm, but the rain came cold, sudden, like a blade wrapped in ice. She felt Emma's small hand grip tighter in her own. Then he stepped into the light. Douglas Hale stood 6 feet tall, muscular from 1,000 hours he spent at the gym, wearing a police academy hoodie he had no right to wear because he never graduated and never would. His eyes were the color of storm clouds just before they break, and his smile was the smile of a man who believed the world owed him everything and had come to collect. 21 months of calm had made Sofia forget how dangerous he looked. Now she remembered. "There's my girl," he said, his voice smooth as engine oil dripping on concrete. Sofia pushed Emma behind her. "Stay away from us, Douglas." He moved toward them with his shoulders leading, the way he always did when he was about to hurt something. Sofia had learned the pattern 8 years ago. She watched his right hand rise toward her left shoulder, the shoulder with the old injury, the one that never healed right, the one he always knew to find. When his fingers closed around her, pain exploded like lightning inside her chest. She screamed, high and sharp, and the sound cut through the rain like a knife through silence. Emma cried out and bolted, but Douglas's grip was iron. He spun Sofia against the brick wall behind them, and she felt her skin tear on the rough mortar, felt warmth spreading across her back, felt 8 years of running come down to this moment in the dark. "You owe me 8 years, Douglas hissed into her face, rain streaming down both their cheeks. 8 years, Sofia. You think you can just leave? You think you can take what's mine?" She was trembling. She could feel her own blood soaking into her hoodie. But something inside her, something that had been sleeping for 8 years, suddenly woke up. Sofia drove her knee upward into his ribs with every fragment of strength she possessed. She heard him grunt, heard the air leave his body like air leaving a punctured lung. His grip loosened for a fraction of a second, and that fraction was all she needed. She twisted free, grabbed Emma's hand, and ran. They ran through the downpour, through streets turned into rivers by the sudden storm. Sofia's vision blurred from the gash across her shoulder blade bleeding through her hoodie. Emma was crying, soaked through, shivering uncontrollably. Sofia ran on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else, pulling the little girl along, counting the blocks, 1, 2, 3, 4, until her lungs felt like they would burst. Then she saw it, pink neon letters spelling out Frank's 24-hour diner, glowing against the black sky like a beacon. She stumbled inside at exactly 3:22 in the morning, dragging Emma with her. Rain pooled on the linoleum floor beneath their feet. The diner was nearly empty, an old man in a corner booth nursing cold coffee, a couple in a back seat not talking to each other, a cook visible through the kitchen window. Aleandro Caruso sat in a booth near the window, and next to him sat Franco, his lieutenant of 15 years, a man with shoulders the width of a doorway and a scar running from his left eye down to his jaw. There was also another man, Rocco, though Sofia did not know this yet, built like a fire hydrant, with a neck thick as a tree trunk. When Aleandro turned and saw the wet, bleeding woman standing in the doorway holding a shivering 8-year-old child, everything inside the diner seemed to stop. The clock above the counter kept moving. The rain kept falling. But the 3 men went absolutely still. Aleandro stood slowly. He was tall, 6'2", with shoulders that filled his tailored black shirt. His hair was dark, silvered at the temples, and his face was all angles and controlled fury. He wore an open-necked shirt that showed the beginning of a scar running from his collarbone downward, and a Rolex watch that cost more than most people made in a year. When he moved toward Sofia, he moved with the grace of a predator closing distance. "Who hurt you?" His voice was quiet, and the quietness made it more dangerous than any shout could have been. Sofia could not answer. Her breath came in gasps that would not fill her lungs. Her shoulder throbbed with a pain so intense it felt like she was being burned from the inside. Emma's small body pressed against her legs, and Sofia could feel the girl shaking. Then Emma looked up at the tall man with the scar, and in the most ordinary voice a child could manage, a voice like she was saying hello to someone she had known her entire life, Emma whispered, "Papa." Aleandro stopped as if he had been shot. Franco's coffee cup froze halfway to his mouth. Rocco's hands came flat against the table. "Emma," Aleandro said, and his voice cracked on her name like porcelain hitting concrete. "Mia piccola Emma." He dropped to his knees in front of her. A man who ruled an empire dropped to his knees on the linoleum floor of a 24-hour diner, and his hands came up to touch her wet hair with a gentleness that did not match his face. His hands were shaking. Sofia had never seen a man like this, a man with power written into every line of his body, shaking because of a child. "Where has she been?" Aleandro asked, but he was looking at Sofia now, and his eyes were burning with a question that had been burning inside him since the night Emma disappeared from a hospital room, since he had spent $2,300,000 searching for her, since he had employed 47 people to follow every lead that went nowhere. Sofia's world tilted on its axis. This was the man Emma had whispered about during their nights together in the shelter. This was the papa from Emma's drawings. But what she did not know was that she was standing before a man who had nearly torn Las Vegas apart looking for his daughter. She did not know that Aleandro had stood in his office just days ago and told Franco that he would burn the entire city down to find her. She did not know any of this yet. Aleandro carried Emma to his car, a black Mercedes S-Class parked outside, gleaming like a weapon in the neon light. Franco helped Sofia walk, his massive hand gentle under her elbow despite the violence that lived in his shoulders. "You're bleeding," he said, though it was obvious. "We're taking you to a doctor," Franco continued, moving her toward the car. Sofia shook her head violently. "No hospitals. They report everything. The police. He'll find me." Aleandro turned from the car, where Emma was already asleep against his shoulder, her small wet hand still gripping his shirt. "Who is he?" Aleandro asked, and the words came out like they had edges. Sofia met his eyes and saw something unexpected there. Controlled fury, yes. But also genuine concern. Also a kind of tenderness that did not belong on a face built for commanding men and moving merchandise and making decisions about people's lives. "Douglas Hale," Sofia whispered. "My ex. He won't stop. He never stops." They drove to Aleandro's estate in Summerlin, through gates set into white stone walls, past security cameras every 20 feet. The house was warm inside, smelling of leather and espresso and something expensive Sofia could not name. A woman named Rosa, the housekeeper, appeared silently and took Emma upstairs to bathe and sleep. Sofia found herself sitting in a kitchen with marble counters and stainless steel appliances while a private doctor, Dr. Marino, in his 60s, moving with the discretion of a man who had seen many things, stitched the wound on her shoulder. 13 stitches. Each one a small sting, each one precise and careful. Aleandro watched from the doorway, still wearing his rain-soaked shirt. When the doctor left, he sat across from Sofia at the island. The kitchen was so quiet you could hear the refrigerator humming in the background. "Tell me everything," he said. Sofia hesitated. The smart thing would be to leave, to find another shelter, another car, another city. This man was dangerous. She could see it in the way he sat, the way he breathed, the way his eyes moved like he was always calculating distances and weaknesses. But Emma was asleep upstairs in a safe bed. For the first time in 6 months, the little girl was in her father's house. Sofia owed her this. "Why would you help me?" Sofia asked instead. "I'm nobody." Aleandro's expression shifted. It was subtle, the tightening around his eyes, the slight relaxation of his jaw, but it was there. In the hallway, Franco stopped and turned back, one eyebrow raised. In 15 years of working for Aleandro Caruso, Franco had never seen his boss look at anyone the way he was looking at Sofia now. "You protected my daughter for 6 months, Aleandro said quietly. "When I could not find her. When I was failing. You kept her safe. You are not nobody." Sofia told him everything. She told him about the night she met Emma at St. Catherine's shelter 6 months ago, when a terrified 8-year-old had run from an intake officer, and Sofia recognized the terror because she had felt that same terror at 21 years old when Douglas Hale first hit her. She told him how she had hidden Emma in the storage room, brought her food from her own meager portions, read to her every night from her grandmother's recipe book, the only thing Sofia owned of real value, filled with recipes and notes in her grandmother's handwriting in the margins, instructions on how to make love visible in every meal. She never told me her last name, Sofia said. She just said her papa had important work and would find her someday. Then Sofia told him about Douglas. About the first time he hit her, how it was gentle, almost like an accident, and how he cried afterward and promised it would never happen again. About the cigarette burns on her back. About the belt buckles that left scars in the shape of clouds. About trying to leave for times and having him find her every time, no matter where she ran. About the 9 times she reported him to police, including once to a lieutenant named Rocco, who took her statement and did nothing. Aleandro's face went absolutely stone cold when she said Rocco's name. This man Douglas Hale, Aleandro said slowly. He is a police officer. He never graduated from the academy, Sofia said. But he works with them. He has connections. Aleandro pulled out his phone and texted Franco, find everything on Douglas Hale. Every detail. Every connection. Every secret. Now. The response came back within seconds, already on it, boss. At 6:15 in the morning, before Sofia could sleep, before she could process where she was or why the world had suddenly shifted, her phone rang. She did not recognize the number. Miss Hartley, a woman's voice said, cultured and cold as January air. This is Cordelia Blackwood. I own St. Catherine's shelter. I understand you have been harboring an unregistered child in my facility for 6 months. Sofia's blood turned to ice. She could not move. She could barely breathe. You have violated state law and my facility's charter, Cordelia continued, and there was pleasure in her voice, the pleasure of holding someone's life in your hands. I am prepared to file charges against you unless you repay the shelter exactly $22,000 for Emma's housing and food costs within 3 days. Otherwise, I will ensure you are prosecuted and that child is remanded to state custody. Sofia whispered, I don't have $22,000. I have $34. That's everything I have. Cordelia laughed, brittle as breaking glass. Then I suggest you find it, Miss Hartley. You have 72 hours. After that, the child enters foster care and you enter prison. The phone went dead. Sofia stood in Aleandro's kitchen, holding the phone, understanding that the world was smaller and crueler than she had allowed herself to believe. Aleandro appeared in the doorway, wet hair combed back, fresh shirt, eyes alert. What happened? He asked. Sofia repeated the call, word for word. She watched his face as she spoke, watched him calculate, watched something dangerous and determined settle into his features like darkness falling. Cordelia Blackwood, he said quietly. Tell me everything, she said. Every word. Sofia told him, and when she finished, Aleandro nodded once, sharp as a blade. You will stay in the East Wing, he said. The guest room has a bed, a bathroom, windows overlooking the garden. You will rest. You will heal. You will not worry about Cordelia Blackwood or Douglas Hale or any of this. Sofia shook her head. He'll find me. He always does. And now this woman, she wants $22,000 in 3 days, and I have nothing. Aleandro stepped closer. His voice dropped to something that was almost gentle, except for the steel underneath every word. Let me be absolutely clear, Sofia. No one will touch you or my daughter. Not Douglas Hale. Not Cordelia Blackwood. Not anyone. I will handle this. Do you understand me? What happened next happened in the dark, in the hours before dawn, in a part of Las Vegas that does not appear on maps. At a gym in Henderson, Douglas Hale received a call from Lieutenant Rocco. Your girl, Rocco said. She's at Aleandro Caruso's estate. Out in Summerlin. Douglas grinned. It was the grin of a man who had just realized the game had gotten much bigger and much more profitable. Caruso. The Mafia boss. Even better. We can squeeze this for leverage. Money, protection, access to his operations. He hung up and texted Cordelia Blackwood, she's hiding with connected friends. Squeeze harder. 22,000 in 3 days. Let's see how far their loyalty goes. Cordelia replied within seconds, filing charges tomorrow. Let's break her. Douglas looked at a photograph of Sofia on his phone, one he had taken 2 weeks ago without her knowledge, through the window of Rose's diner while she wiped tables. In the photo, Sofia looked exhausted, older than her years, broken in ways that photographs could not quite capture. You can't run forever, baby, Douglas whispered to the image. Not from me. The third night at Aleandro's estate arrived with thunder that shook the windows. Sofia sat in the garden behind the guest wing, rain soaking through the borrowed clothes, soft cashmere that cost more than everything she had owned 3 months ago. The storm moved across Las Vegas like a living thing, splitting the sky with lightning that turned everything white and terrible and clear. She held the cream stationery in her trembling hands. The letter was already written. She had written it 3 times, crossing out sentences, trying to find words big enough to hold what she needed to say. The final version lay on her lap, folded once, her name written on the envelope in handwriting that looked like it belonged to someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who wasn't destroying everything beautiful with her presence. Rain ran down her face. She couldn't tell anymore what was rain and what was tears. The letter said, Aleandro, I do not know how to write this without breaking what is left of me. 3 days ago, I did not believe people like you existed. Men who see invisible women. Men who stand in front of danger instead of running from it. You took Emma from a shelter and gave her a father. You took me from a gas station parking lot and gave me something I thought was gone forever, safety. But safety is a lie if it costs you everything. Douglas Hale is still out there. Cordelia Blackwood is still circling. They will use me to destroy you. They will use Emma to destroy you. I love her too much to watch that happen. I love you too much to watch that happen. So I am doing the only kind thing I know how to do. I am leaving before the damage gets worse. Tell Emma that colors are important. Tell her that sad days need colors too. Keep her safe. Be the father she deserves. Forgive me. Sofia. She folded the letter. Slipped it into the envelope. Walked through the dark house toward the kitchen, where she left it on the marble counter next to a vase of white roses that had bloomed that afternoon. Her backpack sat by the front door. Her grandmother's recipe book was inside, the pages worn soft from being read 1,000 times. The notes in the margins, her grandmother's handwriting, a woman she had never met, suddenly felt like the most precious thing in the world. Instructions for living. Recipes for surviving. Small wisdom written in fading pen. Sofia's hand reached for the gate release button at 2:17 in the morning. Her finger hovered there. One button. One press. A new name. A new city. Disappearance. This is right, she told herself. I'm poison. Everyone I touch gets hurt. Emma deserves a father who isn't targeted by my past. The button was cold under her fingertip. Then Emma's voice broke through the thunder, sleepy and small and terrified from an upstairs window. Sofia? Where are you going? Sofia froze. Her hand dropped. She looked up and saw Emma's face in the illuminated window, backlit by the hallway light, and behind her, tall and broad-shouldered in the darkness, Aleandro appeared. His eyes found Sofia at the gate. The backpack. The look on her face. Understanding crashed through him like a wave. He handed Emma to Rosa without a word and ran downstairs, barefoot, into the rain. He reached her at the gate. Rain soaked through his white shirt. His hair was plastered to his forehead. When he looked at her, his eyes were burning with something that was not anger. It was something deeper and more dangerous than anger. Where are you going? His voice was low and controlled, but his hand shook slightly when he took her shoulders. Sofia could not meet his eyes. I wrote you a letter. I can't stay. Douglas and Cordelia, they'll destroy you to get to me. I won't let Emma lose you because of me. You think I'm afraid of Douglas Hale? Aleandro stepped closer, his hand still on her shoulders, gentle but immovable. Of Cordelia Blackwood? Sofia, look at me. She did. His eyes were storm grey in the lightning flash, and they burned with an intensity that made her chest collapse. Do you know what I did before I found you? His voice was like thunder wrapped in velvet. I spent 15 years building an empire so that nobody could ever hurt the people under my protection again. Not my daughter. Not you. I have known about Douglas Hale since the night Emma disappeared. I have known about Cordelia Blackwood for 6 months. I have known about the $22,000. I have known about Lieutenant Rocco's corruption and his pathetic theft and every threat they have made. Then why didn't you? Because I needed you to understand something first. He cupped her face in his hands, rain running between his palms and her skin. I needed you to understand that you are not poison. You are not the reason for any of this. The men who hurt you, the women who tried to destroy you, they are the poison. And poison does not get to decide if you stay or go. I decide that. My men decide that. Emma decides that. You do not get to make yourself disappear because you are afraid. Not anymore. Sofia's breath came in shaking pieces. Listen to me. His forehead touched hers. At 4:30 this morning, my men are going to end this. Completely. Permanently. You are going to stand in the library with Emma and you are going to watch the sunrise. You are going to drink coffee. You are going to read to her from that recipe book. And you are never going to be afraid again. Do you understand? She nodded. She could not speak. The rain fell harder. He pulled her close, and she felt the steady thunder of his heartbeat against her cheek. For a moment, the whole world was just his chest and the rain and the sound of him breathing. Just that. Everything else disappeared. At 4:32 a.m., in the pre-dawn dark of Paradise, Nevada, the front door to Douglas Hale's apartment exploded inward. Franco moved like a blade wrapped in ice, his 5 men flowing behind him in perfect formation. They knew every corner of that apartment because they had been watching it for 72 hours. Douglas was awake, which was lucky for him. Lucky because death comes faster to sleeping men. He was lifting weights in his home gym when they came. 215 pounds of muscle and absolute stupidity, shirtless, the gun on the counter beside his grip tape and his towel. Franco was faster. The gun never made it to Douglas's hand. Franco's shoulder drove him backward into the wall so hard the picture frames rattled and fell. Photographs of Douglas with women scattered across the floor like evidence of a crime scene. Douglas Hale, Franco said. His voice was calm, which was worse than anger. Aleandro Caruso sends his regards. Douglas's face went white. The color drained from his skin like someone had pulled a plug. Wait, we can talk about this. I have money. I have connections. Lieutenant Rocco, he owes me. Rocco? Franco laughed. It was not a kind sound. Your connections? You mean the lieutenant who works for us? Who has always worked for us? Every report Sofia filed, we have copies. Every time he ignored her, every time he told her there was nothing he could do, every time he looked the other way, that was the test. You failed every part of it. Rocco was never your friend, idiota. He was your executioner's shadow. Douglas tried to move. Franco didn't give him the option. He was pinned against the wall like a specimen in a museum, his eyes wide and glassy with the knowledge of what was about to happen. Please. His voice cracked. Please, I'll leave Vegas. I'll never touch her again. I'll go to California, I'll disappear, I'll. Too late for mercy, Franco said. And he nodded to the men behind him. Douglas screamed. It lasted for exactly 4 seconds before one of Franco's hands covered his mouth. The scream ended. The apartment filled with the sound of rain on the windows and the wet sound of what justice looks like when it does not go through courts. Meanwhile, 6 blocks away in Summerlin, Rocco's team was moving through Cordelia Blackwood's mansion like water through a sieve. The security system she had paid $200,000 for opened for them like a welcome mat because Rocco knew every password, every code, every digital weakness in her fortress. They found her in her office on the 2nd floor, shredding documents. She was methodical about it. Page by page, feeding them into a machine that turned 20 years of exploitation into confetti. She did not even look up when the door opened. "You have no authority here," Cordelia said. She was still wearing her designer suit, still standing with her spine straight, still pretending she was a general commanding an army instead of a woman watching her life collapse. "I'm calling my lawyer." Rocco held up a file folder. The contents were thick, detailed, printed on the kind of paper that survives in evidence lockers. "FBI is already at your downtown office, Ms. Blackwood. Fraud, embezzlement, exploitation of state-funded shelters. Turns out your $22,000 threat to Sofia Hartley was just the thread we needed. When we pulled it, your whole operation unraveled." His voice was like a blade cutting through silk. 43 federal violations. 51 victims identified. Your non-profit foundation? A money laundering operation. Your grant applications? Fraudulent. The homeless shelter that gave you tax credits for housing people? You were housing them in unsafe units you owned, taking the state money, then raising their rent until they had nowhere else to go. Cordelia's face was going pale now, the confidence draining like water from a sinking ship. "Federal prison is waiting," Rocco continued. 28 to 40 years, depending on how cooperative you want to be during discovery. We already have your computers, your bank records, your personal communications with Douglas Hale discussing which women you could extort. All of it. All of you. You can't. I have friends. Senators. Judges." Her voice was desperate now, stripped of pretense. "I can make calls. I have connections." "Your senator friends," Rocco said, "got early morning visits too. Federal agents. Search warrants. The same warrants that are currently dismantling everything you built. It's over, Ms. Blackwood. It was over the moment you threatened the daughter of a man who has spent his entire life making sure nobody like you ever hurts children again." The FBI came for Cordelia Blackwood at 6:47 a.m., as the sun was breaking over the desert mountains and painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that had no right to be so beautiful during such an ugly moment. They came with 12 agents in dark jackets marked with yellow letters. They came with cameras and reporters, because Rocco had made sure the media knew exactly where to be and exactly when to arrive. Cordelia was led from her mansion in handcuffs. Her designer suit, her perfect hair, her manicured nails, none of it mattered anymore. The cameras flashed and the reporters shouted and the sun climbed higher, indifferent to her ruin. "Ms. Blackwood, do you have any statement regarding the allegations? Ms. Blackwood, how many victims have been identified? How long do you expect to serve?" She did not answer. Her jaw was clenched so tight her face looked like carved stone. The fury and fear warred in her eyes as they pushed her toward the black sedan that would carry her to the federal building downtown, where the paperwork of her destruction was already being prepared. By 7 a.m., the story was breaking on every local news channel. By 9 a.m., the national networks had picked it up. By noon, federal prosecutors were holding a press conference, detailing the scope of Cordelia Blackwood's fraud, her exploitation of vulnerable women, her systematic extortion scheme. They named Douglas Hale as a co-conspirator. Missing since 4:30 a.m. Presumed fled. The Las Vegas Police Department officially opened a missing persons investigation. No one would ever find him. But Sofia did not know that yet. The television screen glowed blue in the silence of Aleandro's living room. Sofia sat motionless on the white leather sofa, Emma curled against her left side, both of them watching the 7 a.m. news broadcast break into their morning like a blade through water. The anchor's voice was steady, professional, indifferent to the destruction she was describing. Federal authorities have arrested socialite Cordelia Blackwood on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, and extortion affecting over 200 vulnerable women across 3 states. The FBI raid on her charitable foundation revealed a systematic scheme to extract payments from women in crisis, with alleged ties to corrupt police officials and organized crime figures. Blackwood is being held without bail pending arraignment. We're also tracking a manhunt for Douglas Hale, wanted in connection with the same investigation. Police are asking anyone with information to call the tip line. Sofia's hands rose to her mouth. She felt the trembling start in her fingers and spread upward through her wrists, her arms, until her whole body shook like a candle flame in wind. Emma looked up at her. "Is that the mean lady?" "Yes, pick cola." "Will she hurt anyone else?" Sofia could not answer. She was staring at the freeze-frame image on screen, Cordelia Blackwood in handcuffs, her perfect blonde hair falling across her face, her designer suit no longer armor but evidence. The sun was painting everything in shades of orange and pink that had no right to exist in a moment so ugly. The door to the living room opened. Aleandro stood in the threshold, still wearing the rain-soaked white shirt from the garden, the fabric clinging to his chest. His dark eyes moved from the television to Sofia's face to Emma, reading them like a man fluent in the language of fear and relief. "It's over," he said. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "Douglas Hale will never touch you again. Cordelia Blackwood will spend the next 40 years in federal prison." Rocco made certain the media was positioned perfectly. By noon, every news outlet in this country will be running her face. Her empire is dust. Sofia stood slowly, Emma's small hand still gripping her sleeve. She looked at Aleandro and something in her chest broke open, not with shattering, but with the gentle cracking of ice that had held her captive for 8 years. "You did this," she whispered. "For me." "For us," he corrected, stepping closer. The distance between them narrowed like a closing fist. "I told you the night we met. No one touches my family." The word hung in the air between them, suspended, impossibly heavy with meaning. "Family." Sofia's voice fractured. "I'm not your family. I'm nobody. I sleep in cars. I have $34 to my name. Aleandro reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm, his grip steady, his touch like a man soothing a lost child. "You saved my daughter's life the night you threw a punch that connected with Douglas Hale's face. You protected her when I could not. You carried her through rain and blood and terror and never once let go. You are exactly who I thought you were the moment I saw you cradling her in that diner at 3:22 in the morning, brave, selfless, and stronger than you know." He stepped closer. Emma watched both of them, her dark eyes moving between their faces like she was witnessing something sacred. "And if you think I'm letting you walk away," Aleandro continued, his voice dropping to a frequency that seemed to resonate in Sofia's bones, "you're wrong." Sofia could feel tears gathering behind her eyes, but these were not the tears of fear she had carried for nearly a decade. These were different. These were breaking something open that had been sealed shut since the night she ran from Douglas Hale with nothing but a backpack and a recipe book. "The money Cordelia demanded," Aleandro said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. $22,000. I'm establishing a fund in your name at St. Catherine's Women's Shelter. The fund will protect women exactly like you were, women the system has forgotten, women the police refuse to help. Your name, Sofia. Your strength will save other women." She shook her head, unable to speak. "The recipe book you carry everywhere," he continued. "Your grandmother's words in the margins. I want you to use it. Cook with Emma. Teach her the recipes. Build the life you never thought possible. Not in a car behind a gas station. Not in fear. Here. In this home. As part of this family." Sofia felt her knees weaken. Aleandro guided her back to the sofa, sitting beside her, not releasing her hand. Emma squeezed between them, small and warm and present. I read your letter, Aleandro said quietly. The one you were going to leave. The goodbye that was supposed to protect Emma by removing yourself from her life. Sofia's breath caught. She had hidden that letter in her jacket pocket, folded so many times the creases had become soft. I read it, he repeated, and I wept. Because you were willing to disappear forever to protect a child you barely knew. That is not nobody. That is a woman who loves with a force that could rebuild empires. Franco appeared in the doorway, then Rosa beside him. Both of them smiled, not the professional smiles of employees, but genuine expressions of warmth. Franco whispered something to his wife that Sofia did not quite hear, but she caught the words that mattered. Boss is gone. That man in there? That's Aleandro, the father. Sofia stood and walked to the bathroom alone. The shower was marble and silver, enormous, nothing like the truck stop bathrooms where she had washed herself in 3 minutes before the next shift. She stood under water that was perfectly warm, watching 8 years of blood and fear and shame circle the drain. When she emerged, wrapped in a towel so soft it felt like touching clouds, she found that Aleandro had stocked the closet with clothes that fit her, not given to her, but placed there as an invitation, a declaration, you belong here. That evening, they sat together in the kitchen. Sofia opened her grandmother's recipe book and began to read aloud while Emma listened, her small hands dusted with flour as they prepared pasta dough from the first page, the one with handwriting in the margins, make this when the world feels too heavy. Bread and salt and love are the only things that matter. Aleandro watched from the doorway, his expression unguarded for the first time since Sofia had known him. He looked like a man who had carried weight for so long he had forgotten what it felt like to set it down. When the pasta was finished and the three of them sat at the table, Aleandro placed a new phone beside Sofia's plate. No more hiding, he said. No more running. Only trusted numbers. People who will protect you the way I protect you. You're safe here, Sofia. You have been safe since the moment you walked into my life. Sofia looked around the white stone walls, the kitchen filled with the smell of butter and sage, Emma's laughter echoing from upstairs, Aleandro's steady presence beside her. She felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest, something that took her a moment to recognize because it had been absent for so long. Home. Not a place she slept in fear. Not a car that belonged to no one. But home. A place where someone had chosen to stay. Where someone had built a sanctuary not just with walls and stone, but with his own 2 hands, his own choices, his own fierce and uncompromising love. 3 months later, the garden was alive with flowers. Sofia stood among them wearing a simple blue dress, her hair grown longer, the gash on her shoulder now a fading scar like a whisper instead of a scream. The sunrise painted the sky in shades of gold and purple that reminded her of Aleandro's eyes. Emma ran through the garden chasing butterflies, her small voice calling out with pure joy, Sofia. Papa! Look! Look at the colors! Aleandro joined Sofia, standing close enough that their shoulders touched without him needing to reach. She opened her grandmother's recipe book to a page worn soft from her own hands. The margin held her grandmother's looping script, the storm will pass and you are far stronger than you think. She read it aloud. Your grandmother was right, Aleandro said, taking her hand. Sofia smiled. She usually was. They stood together in a light that was no longer cruel, no longer indifferent, but gentle and warm and theirs. In the kitchen, Sofia taught Emma to roll pasta dough. On the terrace at night, she and Aleandro sat talking for hours, his arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest where she could hear his heartbeat steady and strong. At the new women's shelter funded by Aleandro's foundation, Sofia volunteered every Tuesday, helping other women believe that survival was possible, that their scars did not define their futures, that the storm does pass. She walked Emma to school every morning, her hand gripping the small fingers, her voice singing softly. And every night, Sofia slept in a real bed in a real home, her breathing calm and unafraid, no longer looking over her shoulder, no longer counting the hours until dawn. Sofia Hartley had spent 8 years believing she was broken beyond repair. But the night she threw that punch to save a child she barely knew, she discovered something she had forgotten, her own strength. Aleandro Caruso recognized in her the same fire that had saved him, the refusal to let another soul suffer. Douglas Hale disappeared into the darkness. Cordelia Blackwood's empire crumbled. But Sofia found a family forged not by blood but by choice, by sacrifice, by love that asks nothing and gives everything. One evening on the terrace, Emma looked up at Sofia and asked the question that had no single answer but held every answer that mattered. "Sofia, will you stay forever?" Sofia met Aleandro's eyes and saw the question reflected there too, not a question, really, but a promise asking permission to be spoken aloud. "Yes, Piccola," Sofia said. "Forever." If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that they are stronger than they think. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We have more stories coming tomorrow that will change how you see love and redemption. Drop a comment and tell us, what would you have done in Sofia's place? We read every single one. Thank you for being here with us until the very end. Remember, the storm will pass, and you are far stronger than you think. We will see you again soon.